From Anshe Sfard Beth El Emeth Congregation, it's time to take 10 Minutes for Torah with Rabbi Joel Finkelstein.
Welcome to our discussion of Parshat Vayera. When did Yitzhak know? During the binding of Isaac, the Akedat Yitzhak, we know that Yitzhak and Abraham walked together to their destiny. The question is, at what point and did ever Yitzhak realize that he was going to his own slaughter? This question hinges on 4 different sections we can analyze. Number 1, the key section, is the conversation between Abraham and Yitzhak. It's a beautiful conversation touching one in which they relate to each other, they question each other, they speak to each other in loving terms. And let's read it. Vayomer Yitzchak el Avraham aviv. Yitzhak said to Avraham, his father, he spoke to him as his father. Vayomer avi. He said, my father. Vayomer hineni. And he said, here I am, b'ni. A beautiful expression to be fully present for your child. I am here. What can I do for you? Hineni. Behold, I am here, my son. Usually, the inferior says, I am here to his superior. Usually, it's the human being who says hineni to God. Here, Avraham says, I am available to you, my son. The boy is not foolish. He understands that there's the aish, there's a fire, there's wood, but where is the sheep for the offering? Vayomer Avraham, so Avraham said, Elohim yirelo asela b'ni. He said, God will show you the sheep for the offering, my son. And the two walked together. Vayelchu shnehem yachdav. So the question is, when Avraham gave the answer to the question, did Yitzhak understand what he was saying? The Radak actually claims that this sentence can be read in one of 2 ways. You can read it like this. Elokim yirelo haseh leolah b'nei. He says, my son, God will show you the sheep. In which case, they're all waiting for the sheep. And in fact, God does show him a ram in the end, which was to be offered. However, the other interpretation is, God will show you the sheep for the offering, my son. Meaning, my son, you are the offering. The Radak says, Rabbi David Kimchi, commentator from Provence, he says that the sentence could be understood in both ways. But here he agrees with Rashi. Both Rashi and Radak agree that Yitzhak understood what they were doing. Vayelchu shnehem yachdav. They both walked together, understanding fully what they were getting into. But still, one might quibble, one might argue that it was ambiguous, and they left it ambiguous, and they walked together despite the fact that it was not absolutely clear. So let's take a look at a second question, and that is, Vayakode Yitzchak b'no. It says that he bound his son. Now, you might bind the son for one of 2 reasons. Simple reason is resistance. That Yitzchak was not a willing party, and he had to bind him in order to offer him. You don't find a big struggle here, but still, binding implies that perhaps there was a struggle. The rabbinic read of it is not that way. Rabbinic read is that the Midrash says, and you see it in the Slichot during the Aseret Yemei Tshuva, that he said, no, please, God, bind me a little tighter, because I'm afraid that I might flinch. And then the shechita will be pasul, the ritual slaughter will be invalid. I did like when you slaughter an animal, it has to be slaughtered precisely. He was afraid that here the human slaughtering, which will never take place, we don't believe in that, God doesn't believe in that. It's the point of this whole story, perhaps. But he was worried that if indeed there's supposed to be a ritual slaughtering, maybe it'll be ruined by the moving of my neck. Bind me down, akodoti, tie me tightly. It was a willing partnership. They both decided that the binding should be done, and in fact, Yitzhak insisted on a tighter binding so he wouldn't flinch. But still, one might argue that the binding implies that Yitzhak was not complicitous. Then we have a very disturbing phenomenon, and that is, where is Yitzhak? After the binding of Isaac, where did he go? Avraham returns to his lad. What about the boy? Avraham said, we will bow down, go up to the mountain, we will come back. Instead, it says that Avraham returned. Where is Yitzhak? Not only that, but at the funeral of his own mother, we see no evidence that Yitzhak is there. Finally, he begins to come home, and that's when they find him a bride, and he meets Rivka. But where is he all this time? Two possibilities. One is that he was so moved by this experience. He went off to the yeshiva of Shem and Aver. He went off perhaps to Gan Eden, to heaven itself. He was on such a spiritual level. He was not only a partner in this, but through this he was elevated. Another possibility is that through this he became somehow disenchanted, disenfranchised. He decided to go to Be'er Lachai Roi, the place where his wayward brother had gone. He went to the Ishmael place. He went somewhere else. It's a radical suggestion. Of course, not one particularly supported by the ancient rabbis and the Chazal, the Chachamenu Zichronam Levacha, our sages of blessed memory in the Midrash. There, he tends to go off to Gan Eden. He tends to go to good places. And on the contrary, he was elevated by this experience. And finally, in order to appreciate this question, we need to know, how old was this boy? Of course, if you make the calculation of when Sarah died, well, how old was Yitzhak when Sarah died? And that places him at 37. If we say that because of the binding, the news of the binding of Isaac, that's why Sarah died, then Isaac was the age when Sarah died. And that would be 37. However, if you say that the two stories are juxtaposed, but they have no connection per se, if you say that you don't bind someone who's 37, if you say that a conversation like this between Avraham and Yitzchak sounds like a conversation between a little boy and a father, he's very naive, he doesn't know where things are, it doesn't sound like a 37-year-old man, then you say he's more of a child. There are sources that indicate that he was younger. If indeed he was younger, then it's less volitional. If he's older, then surely he's clever, he understands, he sees what's going on, and he's fully participatory. And of course, he's strong enough to resist, and yet he doesn't. So these four questions: how do we understand the fact that they walked together? How do we understand what Abraham told him? How do we understand the whole concept of binding of Isaac? Why do we call it the binding of Isaac? Isn't it really the trial of Abraham? Does the binding imply something less than willing? And then where did Isaac go afterwards? And finally, how old was he during this story? But in the end, preponderance of evidence is that Vayelachu shnehem yachdav. There was no struggle. They walked together, father and son. As I suggested a few months ago, how does a father and son come to the same page? How do they come to land out to walk together? Firstly, they speak to each other as individuals. They call each other by name. They speak to each other respectfully. He says, Hineni, I'm available, I'm ready, I'm listening carefully. They communicate with each other. They ask questions and try to understand what's going on. And then, and only then, they walk together. That's our hope for our families, for us as a Jewish people, to walk together, to ask each other questions, to communicate, to grow to understand each other. And through that, walking together as Jews, face the challenges that face us, walk forward into the future, confidently and together with a sense of unity and purpose, just like Abraham and Yitzhak. Thank you for joining us here at the Anshe Sfard Beth Elameth congregation, here for our discussion of the Akedat Yitzhak, the binding of Isaac. Join us for other discussions of the Parsha and the various holidays. Thanks to Jason Lefkowitz, our producer. Thank you.
This has been 10 Minutes for Torah with Rabbi Joel Finkelstein. To learn more, visit ASBEE.org.